What if the most powerful decision you could make right now was to do absolutely nothing? Not hustle, not grind, not fix, not force. Just pause. It sounds insane, right? In a world that idolizes productivity, stillness feels like failure. Society teaches you, if something's wrong, act immediately, push harder, do more. But what if Carl Jung was right? What if your desperate urge to do something is actually the very thing blocking your transformation? Here's the paradox. Most people don't realize that doing nothing is not the same as giving up. It's not laziness. It's not passivity. It's a form of radical inner trust. When you hit that wall in life, emotionally drained, uncertain, confused, your instinct is to force your way out. You start chasing solutions, looking for strategies, asking everyone but yourself. But Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And here's the twist. The unconscious doesn't respond to force. It responds to awareness, to silence, to space. So what happens when you stop meddling? When you don't intervene? That's when the unconscious begins its work. That's when your psyche starts to reorder itself beneath the surface. Like a snow globe that's been violently shaken, your mind is filled with swirling chaos. But if you stop shaking it and just let it sit, everything settles. The clarity returns. You don't need to do anything, you just need to stop doing everything that's keeping you from hearing your own truth. That's the paradox. The world screams, move faster. Your soul whispers, be still. Carl Jung wasn't advocating for inaction. He was pointing to a deeper kind of action, inner alignment, the kind that only comes when the ego gets quiet. When you choose to do nothing, consciously, you're creating space for the right thing to emerge, not the thing your fear wants, not the thing your trauma demands, but the thing your true self, the one beneath all the noise, already knows. This is where everything starts to fall into place, not because you forced it, but because you finally allowed it. We've been conditioned to believe that control equals power. Control your schedule, control your emotions, control your image, control your life. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of the control we chase is an illusion. Carl Jung knew this. He observed that much of what people call control is simply the ego's attempt to protect itself from the unknown, from chaos, from pain, from the unconscious. We want guarantees, we want outcomes, we want to do something, because doing gives us the illusion that we're in charge. But let's be honest, have you ever overplanned your life, only to watch it fall apart anyway? Have you tried to fix people, force results, or manage every detail, and felt more anxious than ever? That's because control is not the same as peace, and it's not the same as growth. Jung suggested that real transformation begins not when we take control, but when we surrender it. He wrote, "We deem those happy who from the experience of life have learned to bear its ills without being overcome by them." This isn't about being passive. It's about recognizing that your compulsive need to manage everything might actually be the barrier between you and the life that's trying to unfold. Because the more tightly you grip your reality, the more brittle it becomes. You control your emotions so much, you stop feeling. You control your relationships so much, you lose connection. You control your future so much, you miss the opportunities unfolding right now. And the great irony? The moment you loosen your grip, everything starts aligning. Not because you controlled it, but because you finally allowed the deeper intelligence of your psyche to take over. This is what Jung referred to as individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating what lies beneath your conscious awareness. You can't do that by force. You can't strategize your way into wholeness. You have to let go. And yes, it's terrifying. Letting go means trusting something other than your fear. It means believing that even if you don't control the outcome, you'll still be okay. That's the myth society doesn't want you to question, that unless you're doing, you're falling behind. But Jung knew the deeper truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is nothing at all. That's when your life stops being a performance and starts becoming a path. Carl Jung wasn't just a psychologist. He was a deep diver into the mysteries of the human soul. And one of his most revolutionary ideas was this: your unconscious is always working on your behalf if you just get out of its way. That's right. You don't need to consciously fix everything. You don't need to intellectualize your pain. You don't even need to know how to heal, because your psyche already knows. It's built for balance, for integration, for wholeness, but it can't do its work if you're constantly interrupting it with frantic action, distraction, and overthinking. Jung wrote, "The psyche is a self-regulating system." Think about that. Your mind, your emotions, your instincts, they all want to move toward healing, but you short-circuit that process every time you try to rush it or override it. You get sad and immediately try to cheer up. You feel anxious and instantly reach for a distraction. You face confusion and demand clarity. But what if you didn't? What if you simply allowed the sadness to be there? Let the anxiety pass through you. Sat with the confusion without trying to fix it. That's what Jung meant when he talked about letting the psyche do the work. It's not about being helpless. It's about being humble. It's about realizing that there's a deeper intelligence within you, one far wiser than your conscious mind. Dreams are one of the ways your unconscious speaks. Symbols, emotions, patterns, synchronicities. These are not random. They're messages. They're your soul doing its work beneath the surface. But most people never listen. They silence the unconscious with noise, with schedules, with endless scrolling, with self-help hacks that treat symptoms, not the root. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Jung understood that transformation doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from surrendering to the inner process, from trusting that beneath the chaos, your psyche is actually working things out, if you let it. Like a wound that heals without your help, your inner world knows how to realign, if you don't keep picking at it. That's why doing nothing is so powerful. It creates space. It gives the unconscious room to breathe, to speak, to repair. In silence, it whispers. In stillness, it organizes. In surrender, it awakens. So no, doing nothing doesn't mean giving up. It means handing over the wheel to the part of you that's never been broken, only buried, and that's where real healing begins. In a world that glorifies staying connected, plugged in, and constantly reachable, withdrawing seems like weakness. But Carl Jung saw it differently. To him, withdrawal was sacred. It was essential. It was healing. When Jung built his retreat at Bollingen Tower, he didn't just create a getaway. He built a space where he could disconnect from the noise of the world and reconnect with the voice within. He wrote, "At Bollingen, I am in the midst of my true life. I am most deeply myself." He wasn't running away. He was stepping away to tune into something deeper. And that's the power of withdrawal. It's not avoidance. It's alignment. When you withdraw from drama, from stimulation, from needing to respond, you allow your soul to breathe. But most people are terrified of stillness. Because when the world goes quiet, the inner voices get louder. The pain you've suppressed, the doubts you've ignored, the questions you've avoided, they all rise. And that's exactly why withdrawal is so transformative. Because in the silence, you finally hear the truth. Think about it. Have you ever made your biggest realizations when you were alone? Ever felt a strange peace when you stepped away from everything, even if it made no logical sense? That's not an accident. That's your unconscious using withdrawal to bring clarity. And Jung knew this. He observed that when people withdraw, voluntarily and consciously, they begin to integrate. They start to process. They reconnect with the forgotten parts of themselves. But withdrawal takes courage. It means saying no to constant availability. It means letting others misunderstand you. It means not explaining yourself, justifying your boundaries, or apologizing for your need to be alone. And it's in that solitude, when you're not performing, not reacting, not chasing, that the real you begins to surface. Because who are you when no one's watching? Who are you when there's no role to play? That's who your soul is aching to meet, and it doesn't take a mountain cabin or a stone tower like Jung's. It can be as simple as turning off your phone for an hour, taking a walk without headphones, sitting in silence, and listening. Not to the world, but to yourself. This is where everything starts to fall into place. Not by effort, but by presence. You don't have to go to war with your life. Sometimes you just need to step away from it, so it can finally start healing. To understand why doing nothing can be so powerful, we need to understand the two great forces inside you, the ego and the self. Carl Jung spent much of his life exploring the dynamic tension between these two. The ego is who you think you are. It's your identity, your beliefs, your roles, the part of you that tries to control your image and survive in the world. The self is something deeper. It's not who you think you are, it's who you really are. And here's the secret. The ego always wants action. The self seeks integration. The ego says, do something. The self says, be still and listen. The ego panics when life gets uncertain. The self leans into that uncertainty, knowing it's part of your growth. The ego wants to be seen, validated, admired. The self wants to be whole, regardless of how the world sees you, and this is where most people get stuck. They live entirely from the ego, always performing, always proving, always doing. But the truth is, the ego doesn't want healing. It wants control. It doesn't care if you're fulfilled. It just wants to stay in charge. That's why stillness terrifies it. Because in stillness, the mask begins to slip. The truth begins to rise, and the self starts to emerge. But that emergence requires surrender. You have to let go of the identity you've carefully constructed. The labels, the goals, the idea of who you're supposed to be. That's scary. But it's also the beginning of freedom, because the self doesn't need to perform. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't hustle for worthiness. It is worthy. It always was. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you don't become who you truly are by adding more. You become it by shedding what you're not. So when you do nothing, you're not being lazy. You're stepping out of the ego's endless cycle. You're pausing the performance. And in that pause, something sacred happens. The self begins to take the lead. It starts quietly, a subtle sense of peace, a sudden insight, a deep breath where there used to be panic. And over time you realize, you don't need to do more to be more. You just need to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. That's the beginning of real power. Most people think transformation looks like a breakthrough, a big decision, a bold move, a dramatic change. But Carl Jung knew better. He believed that real lasting transformation doesn't begin with a bang. It begins with a letting go of control, letting go of resistance, letting go of who you think you have to be. It too begins in surrender. Now, to most people, that word sounds weak. Surrender? Isn't that giving up? No. In Jungian psychology, surrender is not defeat. It's alignment. It means aligning yourself with the deeper, wiser currents of your unconscious. The parts of you that already know where you need to go and who you're meant to become. See, transformation isn't something you do. It's something you allow. You create the space, you step back, you stop trying to force the outcome, and instead, let life move through you. Jung wrote, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." Think about that. As long as you resist what's happening, your pain, your confusion, your shadow, you stay stuck. You stay locked in the same cycle of overthinking, overdoing, overcompensating. But the moment you surrender, you stop fighting your experience. And that's when it starts to shift. Not instantly, not dramatically, but deeply. Because surrender is the doorway to acceptance. And acceptance is what gives your psyche permission to heal. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You stop trying to control how others see you. You stop trying to predict every next move. You stop trying to be someone you're not, just to avoid rejection. And that surrender, that inner release, it's terrifying at first, because the ego thinks it's going to die. And in a way, it does. The false self begins to unravel. The illusions start to crack. The mask starts to fall. But underneath all of that is the real you, the one you've been running from, the one you've been searching for, the one that doesn't need to be fixed, just remembered. And this is why doing nothing is so powerful. Because when you stop interfering with your healing, when you stop resisting your own growth, when you finally trust the process that's already unfolding inside you, that's when transformation becomes inevitable. You start making decisions from clarity, not fear. You start attracting people who meet you where you are, not where you pretend to be. You start living from the self, not the story. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to force your life to come together, it starts falling into place. Not because you did everything right, but because you stopped getting in the way. That's what Jung meant when he said that only what is really oneself has the power to heal. Your healing isn't out there. It's in you, waiting, whispering, working. You just have to get quiet enough to hear it. We've been taught that life only moves when we push it. That if we're not hustling, chasing, fixing, improving, we're falling behind. That stillness is weakness. That doing nothing is a waste of time. But Carl Jung saw something far more powerful. When you stop trying to control life, life starts to align around who you truly are. Let that sink in. Jung believed that there is a kind of quiet intelligence inside you, a current that knows exactly where to take you. But most people fight the current. They swim upstream. They overthink every decision. They attach themselves to outcomes, timelines, and expectations that were never meant for them. And, in doing so, they create resistance, not results. But what if instead of trying to force your life to work, you let it reorganize around your stillness? Stillness doesn't mean inaction. It means clarity. It means choosing not to act out of fear. It means resisting the temptation to prove, to please, to panic. It means watching things fall away and trusting they were never part of your path to begin with. That relationship that ended, that job you didn't get, that door that slammed shut, maybe it wasn't a failure. Maybe it was your psyche making space. Maybe it was your inner world reorganizing your outer one so you could finally live in truth. Jung understood this deeply. He saw how the unconscious, when left unhindered, naturally reshapes your reality to reflect your wholeness. But only if you stop interfering, only if you stop trying to rush the process, only if you stop needing constant answers and start trusting the questions. There is an alchemy that happens in stillness. You don't have to know how. You don't have to explain it. Just as your body heals a wound without your conscious involvement, your soul knows how to rearrange your life around your truth. It might not happen overnight. It, though, might not look how you expected. But slowly, quietly, things start to shift. The wrong people drift away. The right opportunities show up. The chaos calms, and you begin to realize, the more you align with who you truly are, the more your external world mirrors that alignment. But none of that can happen when you're forcing things. It happens when you pause, when you release, when you allow the deeper wisdom within you to take the lead. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." This is what happens when you choose stillness over struggle, when you choose alignment over approval, when you choose to let go, instead of holding on out of fear. Your life doesn't fall apart, it falls into place. And not because you chased, but because you finally stopped running from yourself. This is the power of Jung's wisdom. This is the gift of doing nothing, not as passivity, but as profound presence. You don't need to force anything anymore. You just need to remember this truth. You are not broken. You are becoming. And your becoming doesn't need your interference. It needs your trust.